I remember this random Tuesday night really clearly. Late, dark outside. I was sitting in my car, parked crooked in front of a Thai place I didn't even love that much. Not bad food, just not something I'd been craving all day. Someone had texted earlier, "You good with Thai?" And I replied, "Yeah," almost automatically. I didn't pause. I didn't check in with myself. I just said yes and kept moving. Sitting there, engine still on, phone face down, I had this quiet moment where I realized I wasn't hungry in the normal sense. I wasn't excited. I was just committed. Committed to not making things awkward. Committed to being easy. At the time, I told myself it was just dinner. $20-something, no big deal. But even then, something about it bothered me. Not the money exactly. More the way the decision happened so fast, it barely felt like one. Once I started noticing that, it showed up everywhere. Weeknight plans were a big one. Drinks after work. Trivia nights. Birthday gatherings for people I liked well enough, but didn't really miss if I skipped a week. I used to say yes to almost all of it. Part of me thought that's what adults do. Another part of me just didn't want to be the guy who always bailed. One drink turned into two. Two turned into an Uber home because I was tired. Then maybe a slice of pizza because it was late and I'd already blown the schedule anyway. $40 here, $60 there. Nothing that felt reckless. It all felt reasonable in isolation. But I noticed something uncomfortable. I wasn't going because I wanted to. I was going because saying no felt heavier than saying yes. I didn't think of it as spending. I thought of it as keeping things smooth. After a while, I started noticing it in smaller moments. The really small ones. The ones that don't feel like decisions at all. Extra toppings. Upgraded sides. Faster shipping. Someone would say, "It's just a couple bucks." And I'd nod along without even checking the price. I didn't want to slow things down. I didn't want to be the person asking questions over $3. At the time, it felt mature. Easygoing. But later, I realized I almost never upgraded things on my own. I upgraded because someone else suggested it. I told myself I was flexible. What I really was inattentive. Those little yeses stacked quietly. Not enough to panic over. Enough to feel this low-grade irritation when I checked my account and couldn't quite explain where the money went. It even showed up at gas stations, which sounds ridiculous until you really think about it. Standing in line, watching the person in front of me grab a drink and a snack, and suddenly my hand is reaching for something I didn't plan to buy. I wasn't hungry. I wasn't thirsty. I just didn't want to be the odd one out walking up with nothing. That's when it hit me how much of my spending was about matching the room. Matching the pace. Matching the vibe. I told myself it was convenience. Or habit. Or boredom. But standing there with a candy bar I didn't want, I could feel it. I had paid a few dollars to stay in rhythm. No one asked me to. No one would have noticed if I hadn't. That part was uncomfortable to sit with. Subscriptions were a slower version of the same thing. Gym memberships, I meant to use more. Streaming services, I barely touched. Apps I downloaded during some phase of motivation and never deleted. Canceling felt like admitting defeat or admitting that a version of me was officially gone. So I kept paying. 20 here, 15 there. I didn't feel broke. I just felt stuck. Every month, money left my account for things that didn't really exist in my life anymore. I told myself I'd get back into them. I told myself it was fine. But the longer I let them run, the heavier they felt. Like I was paying rent on old intentions. Restaurants were another quiet drain. Splitting checks evenly when I ordered less. Covering the tip because no one else wanted to do the math. Saying yes to places I knew were outside my comfort zone because I didn't want to derail the group. I didn't feel taken advantage of. That's what made it tricky. I volunteered. Over time, though, I noticed this dull resentment creeping in. Not toward anyone else. Toward myself. I kept thinking it would balance out eventually. That it was just how social life worked. But balance never really showed up. It just became normal. And normal was expensive. Group trips were where it got louder. Flights booked quickly. Airbnbs that looked great online. Dinners out every night because we're on vacation. I agreed to everything up front and worried about the money later. That part felt familiar. The trip itself was fun. I don't regret going. What stuck with me was the months afterward, watching my credit card balance hover higher than I wanted it to. I kept telling myself the memories were worth it. Sometimes they were. Sometimes they were just memories I didn't think about again. What I regretted wasn't the trip. It was pretending the money wouldn't matter once I got home. Credit cards were a subtler version of the same pattern: reward programs, upgrades, higher limits. Someone explained it confidently, and I nodded along like I understood. I told myself I was being smart, optimizing, playing the game. But the balance kept creeping up. Interest didn't care how agreeable I was. That realization stung more than I expected. I wasn't reckless. I wasn't impulsive. I was compliant. I agreed my way into debt that didn't feel dramatic enough to scare me, but felt heavy enough to follow me around. Work lunches added another layer, ordering what everyone else ordered, paying more than I wanted to avoid explaining myself. It didn't feel like peer pressure. It felt like culture. But culture didn't cover the bill. Over a year, those lunches added up to more than I wanted to admit. And the worst part was how forgettable they were. I couldn't remember what I ate. I could remember the total. That gap bothered me. Spending money on things that didn't even leave a trace. This is the part I didn't want to look at first. I sat down one night and did a rough calculation. Extra meals, Ubers, subscriptions, upgrades. Nothing exact, just honest. It landed somewhere around $3,200 in 1 year. Probably more. The number didn't knock the wind out of me. It just sat there, heavy. That was a used car, or a small emergency fund, or breathing room. And I had spent it making things easier in the moment, making myself agreeable. That realization didn't feel dramatic. It felt quiet and uncomfortable, like noticing a slow leak you've been ignoring. Being agreeable gets praised. Easygoing, chill, low maintenance. I like those labels. I still do, honestly. But once I saw the number, I couldn't unsee the cost. I started remembering moments where I almost spoke up and didn't, where I felt a twinge and brushed it off. It felt mature at the time. Looking back, it feels unfinished. Like I kept swallowing thoughts and paying for the privilege. Money became the stand-in for conversations I never had. Lending money brought its own version of that feeling. Not huge amounts. Enough to notice, enough to miss. I said yes because it felt supportive, because saying no felt cold. When repayment dragged on, I didn't follow up. I didn't want to make it weird. The money left. The discomfort stayed. I wasn't angry at the other person. I was annoyed with myself for pretending generosity didn't have limits. I started realizing how often I use money to avoid friction. Paying instead of discussing, agreeing instead of negotiating. It felt efficient. But efficiency has a cost. Over time, I noticed a weird sense of loss. Not just money, control, choice. I had let momentum decide things for me. And money quietly followed momentum wherever it went. Holidays and birthdays made it more visible. Group gifts, unspoken expectations, traditions that only seemed to get more expensive. I never wanted to be the person who ruined the mood. So I paid. Every year. The amount crept up slowly enough to feel normal. But normal doesn't mean harmless. I could feel it pressing against other parts of my life. Just enough to be annoying. Not enough to force a change. Offering rides was another one. Offering to drive. Offering to pay for gas. Wanting to be useful. It felt good at first. Then it felt expected. Gas isn't free. Time isn't either. I paid in both. I never tracked it. I just noticed I felt tired more often. That connection took longer to make than it should have. Service plans and upgrades followed the same script. Phone plans bigger than my usage. Features I didn't need but didn't decline. Sales language loves agreeable people. I told myself I was future-proofing. But the future never arrived. Just the bill, month after month. The question I almost never asked was simple. Do I actually want this? Agreement moved faster than desire. Money followed momentum. And I kept waking up in situations I didn't quite choose, but paid for anyway. That realization felt sad in a quiet way. like realizing how many days passed on autopilot. The first time I said no and stuck to it, it felt strange. I canceled plans. I stayed home. I didn't spend money. I didn't lose friends. Nothing collapsed. The guilt faded faster than I expected. The relief lasted longer. That contrast stayed with me. Not as a rule, just as a memory. I started thinking of agreeableness like a subscription. Monthly, automatic, rarely reviewed. It wasn't evil. It wasn't useless. It just wasn't free. And once I saw it that way, I couldn't stop noticing where it showed up. I didn't want to stop being kind. I just wanted to know what kindness was costing me. I picture myself late at night again, sitting in the car, engine off this time, thinking about that $3,200 spread out, invisible, real. I'm not angry about it. I'm just more awake. Agreeing always felt light in the moment, heavy later. And I think that's what stuck with me. Being agreeable was never free. I just never asked for the receipt.